David's going to talk about transforming the power of fear. Fear constricts our attention and disconnects us from the deeper resources of the soul. In this presentation, David Bryen will address these issues and more. He will explain the internal skills that, when developed, strengthen the muscles of awareness and attention that allow us to diminish fear's power and to come into a more satisfying relationship with the fear in the world. David Bryen was a professional therapist moving here from Oregon. He pursues an exploration of consciousness through his music, his poetry, his writing, and his teaching. He always defends access to your inner light. Please welcome David Bryen.
Are we on? Thank you, Valerie. And leave my notes here, please. I could probably do that. I'm going to, like I've done in the past, I'm going to do a meditation with the didgeridoo. And rather than have you go into some sort of altered state like a lot of meditations take you to, I want to take you into more of a place where I want you to find inside your own being, the place where you have dialogues with two different parts of yourself. You're not schizophrenic. It's normal to have these kind of things. And to demonstrate that, I want to talk for a second about circular breathing. What makes the didgeridoo work is that the didge player breathes out all the time at the same time that he's breathing in. It's called circular breathing. So you'll hear a constant drone underneath it all while I'm breathing aside from that. So as you sort of marvel at that technique and that style, it's an old style, but as you marvel at that, let yourself go to the place where you can marvel at your ability to stay in that place where you can do two things at the same time. Okay, good morning. I was talking to my wife before I came over here this morning. She says, "Are you nervous?" And I says, "No, I've only peed 20 times this morning." I suppose that you want to ask first what qualifications I have about talking about fear. And my only qualification really is that I've been scared my whole life. And I think most of us have been. What you would have seen if you looked at me from the outside, you would have seen a guy who was pretty aggressive and pretty confident, pretty cocky, pretty robust, kind of take on any challenge there was. But that belied what was underneath, because ever since I was young, I was scared. And I was scared because I learned at age 4 to be afraid of my fear. Because when my mother died when I was 4, and my dad was so hysterical after her death, that any sort of acknowledgement of fear or agony or pain or tears would throw my father into a rage. So I learned very early that it was really important to be afraid of fear. So I learned not to ever express it. So whenever there was a challenge, there was a contest, I would be the first to jump into it. Or so you would have seen something on the outside that belied what was really on the inside. So where I'd like to start with you this morning is to have us all accept the fact that fear is here in the world, and I will not take it away. You will not be able to take it away. It goes against everything there is in human life to take fear away. And then we need to begin to acknowledge, in order to have any sort of control or to regulate fear, we need to have the bottom line awareness that we all have fear. Now, if you're a guy, what we're told to be men, we're not allowed to have fear. How many men felt in their life that it is wrong to show fear in business, to show fear in a relationship? It's very, very common to admit to ourselves that we're terrified and afraid human beings. So we tend, as a human species and society, to avoid the reality that we have fear. And yet, how many of you feel now, both being here in Ajijic, we have to address what's happened here, the violence here. But in the world, how many of you feel that there's more violence or more fear in the world now than there was when you were a child? Okay. Fear has grown. And as a result of fear growing, then violence grows. And I'm not really sure which came first, but we do know that that fear has grown in the world. I was talking to some friends who were down from Oregon just the other day, and they told me that the amount of TV you watch is direct proportion to the amount of fear that you feel. So there's something, and I don't know if you've noticed, anybody watch the news, CNN, go on their computer to Google? Anybody do that stuff? You notice how much fear dominates what's on the TV? Or how many of you have watched any of the Republican debates? Has anybody noticed a little bit of fear? And somehow the politicians unfortunately know that if they can activate the fear response in us, they got a better chance of getting their message across. Because once you create a story of fear in the brain, it takes a long time to begin to think rationally after that story is dropped in. So all you have to do is mention a traumatic event, and people, to make sense of the event, will run that tape of the event, and it takes a long time for that event to go away. And in the meantime, they're slipping the message in of, I'm going to take care of your fear. Then it doesn't work. It just creates more and more fear in the world. So, do any of you have trouble admitting fear? Do you have a way to share that with your intimate people, your partners, your people you love? If you have a way of talking about fear, being able to talk about fear does it allows a sort of vulnerability that helps us all be safe. And so I would hope this morning as we talk about fears, your fears might not be the same as mine, and mine won't be the same as yours. But if we can talk that generally there's a lot of fear, fears we age, fears that some of us, I don't want to talk about that, but some of us have trouble with our sexual activity, the body begins to change sort of things, and the things we once held dear have gone away. And so if we can just, as a group of people, look around and say, I bet that person sitting next to me has their own set of fears, and I bet you there's fear going on in them that they don't even know about yet. And if we can do that, then we can feel safe, sort of have a community here that can talk about fear. So what I want to say about fear initially is that fear is, one way to look at fear is that fear is that which dulls the immediate experience of our true human identity. And our true human identity It means that we've lost the connection of the grandeur of the world. We've lost the world where we're experiencing something larger than ourselves. We've lost the majesty of the tree. When we're in fear, we lose the majesty of the tree. It goes away because fear takes all of our attention. It takes away the mystery of otherness, so that we live in a world that's flattened out, and there's nothing that carries us other than finding a way to get rid of our fear, because we've lost touch with the grandeur of the world. So, if I could read a poem of Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is one of those former poets out of Tennessee, I believe. This is called The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's life would be. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake at night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's life may be. I go and lie down where the wood drake rests. I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the green heron feeds. I come to the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Nice? So we're not going to send fear away, but we're going to try to regulate it. So a couple questions for you, and you can answer this out loud or quietly, it doesn't matter to me. What is the fear that visits you the most often? And notice my language. What is the fear that visits you? Because when you begin to peel layers off of fear, you will realize that something has presented itself to you, and then your body responds with fear. Right? So let me just ask, what is the fear that visits you the most often? Yes?
My fear often has no name.
Has no name, dread. So it's kind of a general sense of dread. Okay? Anybody else? Yes?
Like a fear of losing control of the situation.
Losing control of the situation. Okay? Yes?
People driving too fast.
People driving too fast? Okay. That was me in your rearview mirror the other day.
Fear of losing physical capacity.
Fear of losing physical capacity. Ditto. Fear of ditto. Yes.
Fear of the future.
Fear of the future. What is the future going to bring? Okay. Anybody afraid of pain? Fear of pain? Anybody here fear boredom? I'm going to be bored. Does anybody have the fear of that time is running out? The time is running out. Anybody feel the loss of the stock market crashing and losing material wealth? Anybody afraid that Social Security might go down the drain? Is anybody, if you're rather Republican or rather Democrat, do you fear the opposite party? Do you fear, you do?
I fear what the Democrats are doing to the United States of America.
Yeah,
That's why I'm here.
yeah, and that will get an opposite reaction, you understand, because in the debate, what happens in fear, we can get to that the wide variety of what a Democrat is, for example, becomes a one thing, and the wide mystery of who that person is who is a Democrat gets lost when fear has taken over. And that's one of the reasons why there's so much danger in the world, because of the way that fear flattens life so that people become a small thing rather than a large thing. Fear of going crazy.
Fear of climate change and its effects.
Fear of climate change. So another great fear that we have, and it might go back to this feeling of dread, is this feeling of scarcity. So there's not enough to go around. There's not enough air, there's not enough water, there's not enough food, or there's too many people, too many things. Yes? Another comment? Okay, so let's stop there. Here's the critical question to ask. How does danger turn into fear? Think about that. Most of what we experience as danger is not in fact danger. What we experience is we experience fear, or the body's response to the danger that's another part of our brain perceives. When you wake up at night and your heart is pounding, there's no danger. There's fear. And one of the things I'll say today that's really important is that it's important for us to figure out when we are in fact in danger and when we're in fear. Because fear, this is the other thing you got to get, fear is most of the time, and often the 90-95%, fear is a story generated by the mind that we perceive. And when the body perceives fear, it will react as if there is danger. That's why when I'm not going to, but if I were to describe to you a very fearful, awful situation, and we could monitor your eyes, your heartbeat, and your breath, just by saying the word, I can put you into trauma. Right here. I'm not going to do it because I don't want you to be in trauma today. But if I just say and describe an experience, I can put you all into trauma, because to make sense of what I say, you've got to imagine in your mind, and then when it's in your mind, your body will respond to it as if it's in fact danger, when there is no danger. And for example, if I was really, really good, I could tell you that there was a lion that was prowling around back there. If I was really, really good and really, really dramatic, you know, and I just saw a minute you, with that reaction, you go into trauma right away. And that's because in the base part of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain, we are hardwired to respond to danger. We are not hardwired to respond to good. Yes?
Could you explain the difference between concern and fear?
Between concern and fear.
Fear is not much like fear.
The question is, can I explain the difference between concern and fear, or worry and fear? And I think what I would want to do here is not go into that real deeply, except to understand that there's a continuum from mild concern, you know, to there's a guy with a gun to my head, and somewhere on that continuum is where we're going to find ourselves. So when fear or danger approaches us, we typically have three responses. So if you can kind of identify which one of these responses is you, we either fight, we run, we flee, or we freeze. Or you could say we attack, we run, or we suck up. Many of us, when we're in conflict and fear, rather than answer it in a more intelligent way, we get passive, we suck up, we try to make everyone feel happy or whatever with us. So that comes from the deepest part of the brain. It's called the amygdala, and it's our immediate reaction to fear. It's automatic. It operates in 0.002 hundredths of a second. It's immediate. It's run by stories, it's run by past, it's run by perception of danger. The thinking part of the brain takes 0.02 seconds to respond. Now, I'm a motorcycle driver, and I teach motorcycle safety, and one of the things we teach in motorcycle safety is something we call target fixation. And in target fixation, when you're in a corner on a motorcycle, and you see a rock in the road, the instinct is to look at the rock because that's where the danger is. Okay, that's the instinct. When there's a danger to us out here in the world, we see something, our instinct is to see the danger and put our eyes on the danger. That's instinct. And what you have to learn as a motorcyclist is to look where you want to go, not at the danger. Where your focus is, that's where you're going to go. We say in motorcycle training, you go where you look. So if you want to go somewhere, that's where you want to go. And so we're driving along, we see a rock, and we go, oh, I see a rock. Hit it every time. We don't want to hit the rock. The brain has said, look up, there's a bad rock, but we know that you go where you look. So with that in mind, I want to describe to you briefly the 4 brains that we have. We have 4 brains in our bodies. Okay? The first is what I'll call the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain wants to teach us how to survive. And when we perceive danger, that's the first thing that gets activated. And it stores memory in that part of the brain, and it stores a story that is immediately accessible whenever there's danger again. The next brain, and this is the center of the brain, is the amygdala reptilian brain, interested in survival. The next part of the brain that developed outside of that is the mammalian brain. And the mammalian brain is responsible for community and for connection. It wants to make sure you're not abandoned. You think of that as if you're operating from the mammalian brain, you're not going to do anything that will kick you out of the tribe because you'll starve to death. It's pretty primitive. It doesn't have a lot of logic and thought. It simply obeys because if you don't, then you're going to go to hell. You're going to get cast out of your family. You're going to find a problem in the world that you're in. The third brain, that developed even later after that, is the neocortex, and that's responsible for logical and rational thought. And the fourth brain, if you listened to me before, you know where the fourth brain is. Where's that? It's the heart. There's 6% as many neural connections in the heart as there is in the entire brain. And that's the heart is responsible for connection, for love, for relationship. The mammalian doesn't care about relationship. It doesn't care if you are loved. It cares if you're taken care of. The heart, on the other hand, wants to connect with the world. And that's where you get these come to a sunset, and something happens, and all of a sudden your awareness sinks down to a place of real love and compassion and beauty. That's because the awareness has shifted from the thought of, oh, this is a beautiful sunset, it's green and blue, down to, wow, I am moved by this. I'm moved into this. So, because of these 4 brains, what we have to learn how to do as people is to develop the awareness and the understanding that I have a choice out of which brain I operate from. I have a choice. I do not have to operate from my reptilian fight or flight. I can develop my awareness to know what are the clues that I have that I've dropped into my flight mechanism, kill the guy, kill her, kill him, do what I have to do, or whether I got to run, which neither of those are really productive in terms of making the world go on. And so I have to learn that I can make a choice of where I'm processing from. So I really literally think of it as, and I will do this if I'm in trouble emotionally with a fight with someone or something. I will tap my heart because that reminds me that this is where I want to be thinking from. Simply when you're one of the skills of as soon as you recognize that you are in danger or in fear, come to the heart, and you want to ask the heart, how would the heart respond in this moment? It's a totally different experience than what the logical mind would say. So if I can learn that, so I think that I have like this processor. I don't know how it would actually work. This processor that goes into, I can operate from the fight or flight, the reptilian brain. And when I'm there, man, you don't want to be around me. You don't want to be against me if you find that part of me that can kill you with words. I don't do it with violence, but my words, they'll just, boom. Anybody else have that ever experienced this thing where something took over and all of a sudden you're meaner than you want to be? You felt that? No, you're the only one here, I think. Something in us, when it falls into that reptilian thing, it wants to hurt. And as soon as it wants to hurt, we begin to move out of that, back into the heart or back to my man, what's going to happen with this friend now? Now I'm in real trouble because that part is very, very vicious. So part of the task here in dealing with fear is to recognize when that fear thing is activated and say, wait, I'm in fear. Am I in danger? No, but there's some fear here, there's some concern here, there's a little bit of worry here, there's violence here in the neighborhood. What do we do? What do we do with that? Well, part of it is to develop the ability so that, like in the circular breathing, that I can say, fear is in me now. And also, love is in me now. or connection is in me now, or wisdom is in me now. I don't have to simply identify with the fear. I can make a choice of where I'm processing from. So, as I said earlier, is that most of the what we experience as fear comes from a story. And I say to people, I say this a little bit more dogmatically than I actually experience it. But I'll say it dogmatically so you have to take it in. Every fear you fear comes from a story. It all comes from a story. Now, before we talked about, before the class, a friend of mine came up and said, David, talk about the violence here in Ajijic. We've seen some, right? We all know what we're talking about. And what we have is a delicate thing. It's a delicate thing with fear, because if I go in the world unconsciously and don't acknowledge the objective danger that's here, I could run more risk. But if I walk out of my house in that reptilian story of danger that's going on, I will walk around the world, and my experience of the world will be very small and very narrow and very flat. And then our humanity goes away, and that's when we don't greet the world, we don't greet the trees, we don't greet each other with our heart. We greet it out of this story of abject fear. So one of the most important things is for us in our relationships and in our own consciousness to begin to say, what are the fear stories that run me? What's the favorite fear story that runs you? And to recognize that as not danger. You're not in danger. I'll just say that. We are not in danger here. I might be a little bit in danger. You guys might throw me out, but you guys aren't in danger, you know. You might not like what I say, you know, but you might not like what I say. You might get turned off by what I say. Am I in danger because of that? But could I experience fear being up front? You know? Did you know that they run statistics that say people are more afraid of public speaking than of dying? Can you imagine? So there is no danger here. If I feel fear, that's because of story from somewhere in the past where I've been embarrassed, I've been laughed at, I've been tomatoes thrown at me or something. But it's not real. It comes from imagination. When we get this critical thing, is that fear comes from a story. When I get afraid, then I bring my awareness, my attention to what the story is. Then I begin to have a dialogue with the fear. Is this real? I'm sweating as if something is chasing me and wanting to hurt me. But where is that coming from? It's coming from my internal story, not from objective in the world. And even if you didn't like me, so what? You know? The only thing that goes wrong is when David speaks next time at Open Circuit, you're not going to come. You know, that's all. There's no danger in that at all. So the way fear works is, let's talk a minute about where fear's disguises are. So here's where I think fear hides itself. Anger. You want to find your fear? Tell me what pisses you off. Tell me what pisses you off, and I'll tell you what your anger is. Yes?
We're losing natural food because of modifying.
Say again.
Genetically modifying food scares me.
Okay.
Soon we will be not able to buy seasonally store and
Genetically
tasty tomatoes.
Yes. Genetically. Now, if we were to take the time to have us list the different fears that are here, you can imagine we would take another 5 minutes probably. We all have these various things of fear. But so if you want to find your fear, find out what it is you bitch about. When you talk to your neighbors, what are you grinding on them with? What stories are you telling each other? Gossip. You want to find your fear? Get in touch with where and how you gossip, and find out what is the fear that's driving the gossip. And you'll find in most gossip, this sort of juicy stuff that women do. Men don't do it, by the way. Come on, guys, give me some help here, you know. Now, we might brag about the horsepower of our cars, the speed of our computers, but we would never. But in gossip, you'll find that there's something afraid of, and that most often has to do with your self-image. We want to put someone down and make ourselves feel better. But there's fear there. There's fear of our own self-image. The desire to control. What do you want to control? You want to control the police down here in Ajijic? That's fear speaking. And so we get this idea that we also want to control things. If I can identify who caused my fears, and if it's the Republican or the Democrats that are causing my fears, then I can go kill the sons of bitches. I mean, I gotta go kill the. We can say that here because they don't care, right? But then if I can identify the enemy, and then I can figure out if I can control that and make it go away, then my fear will go away. But it won't. It won't go away. It'll just postpone it to another thing. Because then, once you get in control, then you fear losing control. Okay. So blame is a way to identify where fear hides, and what I call words of cement. Whenever I say women are gossips, you know, if I say that, I would never say that out loud. But if I were to say that, I've taken the wide spectrum of women in the world and made it down to one small thing that I can define, and in that is some sort of fear that I would feel. That's why it comes into blame. So, how are we doing on time here? Talked about target fixation. Okay, so let me talk about some ways out of fear and some reflections on fear. Robert Sordello, a theorist that I really like, I read a lot of his book. I read it a lot. He talks about fear essentially means that I have disconnected myself from my soul. And I'm no longer in touch with the big soul, the big self, the big sense of the sacred that carries me all the time. And when I'm in fear, I've lost touch with that. And the task then becomes, how do I develop the muscle of connecting back up to the deep self? So when his idea, I really was looking at it this week, I really liked it a lot. He says, how many of you wake up at night with sort of apprehension and fear and dread and fussing? Anybody do that besides my wife? I'm not afraid she'll kill me for saying it. But, or the sense of running out of time, or the sense of boredom, need to be seen as invitations of the soul, because the soul is saying, I might not get a chance to express in life what I want to express. That fear can be an invitation to the fact that I'm separated from my soul. And the task is now, rather than try to fix what's causing my fear, the task is to use my consciousness and my awareness to come into a relationship with fear and get into a dialogue with fear. Why are you afraid? What's the story underneath here? What's underneath this thing that's causing me to wake up? And he says that this dread of night is a fear that time is running out, that the soul won't have a chance to do in life what it wants us to do. And my perspective as a therapist and as a spiritual seeker is that the soul is asking for sovereignty. The soul is asking for expression, it's asking for art, it's asking for poetry, it's asking for beauty, it's asking for connection to the world, it's asking for time. And this is Sordello's language around time that I really love. He says that what the soul really wants. And down here, I think we have this in spades if we'll access it. He says what time really wants is the duration of time. Thick, velvety, rich, deep. Soul can't be harried or hurried. It has to take in events slowly, ruminating over them, turning them into our own experiences. When the soul is bombarded by a rapid series of events that have little depth, another kind of fear enters soul life. We experience this as running out of time. Nice. The soul wants time to sit with what is. And I want to say to you, rather than try to make fear go away, the soul is saying, come into a relationship with fear and see what it's trying to tell you. You know, so if I, let's say I'm thinking of a talk I'm going to give to Open Circle and I start getting afraid, if I will sit down and say, oh, fear is here. What does that fear have to say to me? What it will put me in touch with is the fact that the soul is saying, David, sometimes when you get up in front of people, you lose touch with what I want to say, what the soul wants to say. And that's what the fear is about. So rather than being afraid of my fear and judging my fear and trying to make it go away, I come into a relationship with it. And as soon as I come into a relationship with it, it begins to soften, and I begin to touch again the grandeur of the world that is here in front of us. So, I'm talking to Patricia before the meeting today. Patricia, I'll see if I can address the questions you raised here. We just had a murder a couple months ago here, a couple blocks away, right? And we had 911, and we had a cruise ship tip over in Italy, and we have war, we have kidnappings, we have all sorts of things to do. And every time we immerse ourselves in the fear, because remember, that part of the brain loves to go towards danger. And we love to, why are there so many murder shows on TV, right? Why do people look at that? Well, because that part of the brain wants to draw us there. So when we find ourselves caught in a story of the violence, say the violence that's here in Ajijic, my task is to say, this fear has come into me. Can I still see the tree? Can I open the soul back up to the world so that what I experience is not only the fear that might be there because of this experience that I passed through, but can I also at that time marvel at the grandeur of the mountains? Can I take the time to also smell the air and see what else is here other than fear? Because fear primarily restricts the soul in such a way that if I'm in fear, it's like I have a telescope, and the telescope narrows my focus, and all I can see down the telescope is a small part of the world in front of me. And the task when I recognize that I'm in fear is to say there's a whole wide experience. So one of the things that I learned years ago, I'd be in therapy and someone would ask me a really hard question, or I'd get caught into something I didn't know what to do. And I learned if I would just simply look at the light in the room and see the amazing way that the light from one corner to the other corner were different. And that became a signal for me that whenever I was scared, feeling sort of panic, sort of, what am I going to say now? They're going to commit suicide, blah, blah, blah. All I would do is come to the light in the room and see what was there. And it would then remind me that not only is there fear in the room, but there's also grace in the room. Wendell Berry's poem, go to where the wild drakes sleep, find the peace of the wild things. And so as we work with our fear, one of the things to do is to understand that fear is an invitation back to the soul. It doesn't make fear go away, but now rather than it being a microscopic of the whole thing in front of me, I can walk into the world with my heart intact. What happens when a person has found a way to live from that fourth brain, the brain that's in the heart, is that it very quickly dissolves other people's reptilian awareness. If someone is in their reptilian fear and you feel the sort of desire to hurt you with what they have to say, as soon as you drop back into the heart and begin to meet that energy with the heart, it will dissolve the fear energy that's in the room. It's just because I come and say, this heart energy is so powerful that it will quickly dissolve. And even if there's deep violence, and there were people who would attest to this, when there's deep violence or deep threat, there's danger, someone pulling a gun or a knife or something, that if a person can stay in their heart, it will very often deactivate the rage and the danger that's from the other person. So where was it? Yes, so a couple things here. As you know, there's lots to say about fear. Let me give you the way out, 5 brief things. First of all, I've got to develop my awareness. You've got to recognize when you're in fear. So when you talk with your family, your friends, and someone's in fear, whether they're gossip or they're bitching or they're complaining or you see their wide eyes, say, okay, you're in fear now. I'm in fear now. Become aware, because as soon as I become aware of my fear is diminished just because I become aware of it. I'm no longer identified with my fear, and I can say, okay, but fear is in me, and I don't need to respond totally. I can still have it. The fear's not going to go away, but I'm bigger than my fear. Second thing is to come into a relationship with that fear, to get into dialogue, and rather than make it afraid of me because I don't want it around. And one of my teachers came to fear and recognized that fear, he said to fear is a great God, and I will never vanquish you, but I can love you. Fear, you are a great God, and I cannot vanquish you, but I can come to love you. And so that's the second thing, is to come into life. And the second is to ask the question, where is my attention? Is my attention coming from the fear, or is my attention spread out across the wide spectrum of the world? And then to re-engage in the world. Which means, very, very simply, when I'm in fear, if I can simply lift my eyes away from the little thing of fear I see and open to the grandeur of the world, whether it's the light, the ground, whether it's the chair that holds you up, or the color of the clothes. There's so much grace that's in the world. And Sardello's idea is that the world presents to us its grace all the time. It's not just that we see the great mountain, but the mountain is trying to send us its grace all the time. Does that make sense? It's not just a passive world that we look at. It's something that comes from the world. So can I find what's coming to me from the butterfly, from the grass, from the weeds, from the ants? Can I find that and recognize the grandeur of what's going on there? And the other thing is to understand that the soul thrives the most when it's in service. The soul wants to be in service. It might be in service to beauty, in service to poetry, to writing, in service to another human being, in service to the self. But the soul wants us to think about how to serve the world. That's when we're happy, not when we're trying to get from the world. The soul wants us to be in service. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I have more that I can say, but I would like to open up for questions now. Do you have 5 or 10 minutes here for questions? The questions you have about fear specific or, okay? Yeah, here.
It's not as much as a question as a comment, because when you were talking most at the personal level of our fears. And most of us have somehow, with age, learned to deal with it. What really troubles me, though, is that so many nations in this world operate entirely out of fear.
Exactly.
I have a Japanese friend who says Japanese society lives on fear.
Yes.
I can think of a big nation to the north of here that entirely lives on fear,
Canada.
based on a story.
Canada?
Well, I'm from Canada, but between here and there.
Okay, your point's well
You know, you talk about the story that provoked this fear, the 9/11 story, and what price have you paid, you know?
Okay.
And there's another one on the horizon now with Iran, both operating out entirely out of fear.
And you can see that.
And how can we change that, you know? That's the thing.
Okay, how can we change violence in the world? One of the things that has to happen is that more and more of us need to reconnect with the soul, because the only way to dissolve that is that collectively we respond from the heart and from the soul, and not with our own way. Let's get rid of these people who are doing that. It's so easy to reactivate the reptilian and want to kill that which threatens it. So it's a huge problem. Question or? Oh, what's this? Okay. I don't know if it's giving me a peace sign or wanted to say something.
You talk about soul. Could you give your definition of soul?
So I would just say, really, the soul is the capacity for relatedness. It's something that, the part of us that wants to reach out and connect to the world. So I fear and soul are so anathema to each other because fear doesn't allow me to connect to the world. It only wants me to connect to the story and solving that story that's there. Come back here.
What are some of the ways or exercises a person...
Wait for the mic, please.
Oh.
What are some of the ways?
What are some of the ways or exercises a person can use to reconnect with the soul?
Okay, I'll give you one. I'll use the light. The question is, what are some things to do that? As soon as I recognize that I'm in fear, this needs to be done before that, is to spend maybe 4 or 5 times a day, take 5 minutes to look at whatever is in front of you and begin to sense what that is sending towards you. And feel that, let that go into your eyes and down into your whole being so that your whole being begins to experience what the world is presenting to us. And what I see back here, I just look out there and go, look at these trees, and I'm there. But I've done a lot of work to develop that sense so that when I'm in fear, I can then turn that thing on so that it comes on so that awareness can exist side by side with my fear. Okay? Other questions?
Yes.
Again. Stand, please, and hold the mic straight in.
On the handle.
Come closer.
Yeah, the handle.
Can you hear me?
I can.
How are you defining heart as a brain? The heart is a giant muscle and it has to have lots and lots of neurons just to be beating all life long. It doesn't make it a brain. Every muscle has neurons.
Actually, the heart was the first brain. The heart starts before the brain.
How are you defining brain?
Well, what's in the brain?
Okay, but hearts don't think.
Well, that's where you're wrong.
Is this biological?
You brought, sir, I said it kind of harshly, right? Feel like reptilian come out there? You know? No. Seriously, they have discovered in recent years.
Who's they? The scientists?
Scientists, yeah.
Okay.
It's becoming very, very conscious. But
I'd like to know more about
Eastern medicine knows it's known this all along, but it's just becoming an understanding that there is more neurobiological substance in the heart, 60% as much as there is in the whole head.
I can say that I feel a
Mama,
great
he can't
pain.
hear you.
I don't know if anybody feels this, but when an animal dies, it's been since my childhood, I feel a very strong physical pain in my chest.
Yeah.
I never thought of it as a brain.
It is. And that's what when we talk about, I have gut wisdom, we grab here, this whole idea that when we think in those feeling terms, we're always touching the solar plexus or the heart. Because we know instinctively that there's a mechanism of thought that's down here. It's not so much like verbal thought like you think in the brain. It's more processing. It's an intuitive way of knowing, and it's done from the gut. We can talk more.
Yeah, I want to talk about it.
How would you recommend somebody watch the news?
Don't.
I don't watch the news, but my husband does. He's like a news junkie, so I'm making me think. But
Well, again, I think I go on Google and I go on the internet a lot personally, and partly it's because I'm really interested in tracking what fear does in the world. I'm very, very interested in watching. In the Republican debate, I'm really watching how they're using fear. Now, I have no doubt the Democrats are going to find a way to do it as well, because it's a way. So, if one comes to it with the awareness of fear, that I think as a culture, we've got to look at this fear story. It's the fear that they're going to hurt us that makes us hurt them first. And that's because there's a story and an imagination, but all this comes because the imagination is acted out, not so much because there's danger. Okay, yes?
Someone told me a few years ago, if you react just with your head, you'll never give anything away, because that doesn't make any sense. If you react only with your heart, you give everything away, and then you'll never have anything left for yourself. So you have to go to another place where there is feeling, but also some common sense.
So to follow that, in my understanding of the 4 brains, You have to understand that you are not one of those four brains. You are above and beyond all of them. Your awareness, who you are, is not dependent upon which brain you're operating from. So if the heart says, give all your money away to the poor, you know, the other brain's going to say, hey, wait a minute, I have a problem with that. You know, but when we can understand that my responsibility as a conscious human being is to decide which brain is used for what purpose. The brain and the mind is to be used for my purposes, not his purposes. Okay, we're against one more minute. Okay, one more question.
Oh, just quickly, what
Hold
happens
it
if
close, hold it close.
what happens if you have a mechanical heart put in?
Let me just say here, and try not to be reptilian about it. When you listen to science, they have no understanding of neural networks that will operate outside of a muscle of my finger. There are layers, and any acupuncturist you have a talk with, or any people that do yoga or any sort of bioenergetic work, we'll talk all the time about the force fields that run through the body. They can't identify they can with some galvanic skin stuff, but they can't identify it as a muscle. Okay, Burl.
David, I think there's also information in fear.
Yes.
Just as you said, for instance, the situation that if I use what has happened here in IE, to be just a little bit more cautious and aware of my surroundings. That I think there's also some good information in fear sometimes.
Yes. Exactly. So you walk out and you're aware and conscious of the reality that's down here. When you're driving in Guadalajara, you better have that reptilian working. When I'm driving in Guadalajara, I want that instinct to work for me. I don't want my soft, loving heart to work when I'm driving in Guadalajara.
Thank you, David.
So I want to say one more thing before I go. One more thing. Back at the back, I've got a sign-up sheet. I'm going to sign up. I'm going to give you David's tips for taming fear. I have a mailing list back there. Sign up for it if you like that, and I'll put you on my mailing list for other things that are coming. Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you. Open circle. Jim wants to make a quick announcement. He gave me a note about that, and I forgot.
I was going to mention David's sign-up sheet back here too, so he did that. There's another sign-up sheet that I didn't put out in time for everybody to see. On February the 20th, at 2 o'clock in the Sala, there's going to be a video presentation, the first half of a video presentation on the history of the universe in 4 hours. And the first half of it will be a couple hours. There'll be room for discussion and so forth. The 29th of February at 2 o'clock it'll finish. So if you're interested, if you put your name and email address over here, I'll make sure you get further information about it. Thanks.
Open Circle begins each Sunday morning with coffee and tea and sandwich bites at 10 a.m. socializing, and the presentation begins at 10:30 Gringo time. Next Sunday, February 12th, Jim Tipton will be our speaker. Jim is a Lakeside resident, an international writer who will be talking about the ecstatic poets, both Christian and Muslim, and then demonstrate how he has been influenced by them as he quotes from his most recent book, To Love for 1,000 Years. Jim has published more than 1,000 articles, short stories, poems, and reviews. He's an associate editor of the El Ojo del Lago and writes a popular monthly column titled Hearts at Work for that magazine. He's also the author of several books, including Letters from a Stranger, with an introduction by the Chilean author Isabel Allende, and recently 3 books in bilingual editions, Washing Dishes in the Ancient Village, All the Horses of Heaven, To Love for 1,000 Years. Please remember to turn your cell phones back on, pick up your coffee cups, and stack your chairs by color and style. Thanks so much for coming. We'll see you next Sunday.